Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome to our keynote speaker this evening, Mr. Bill Imada.
Thank you, Rona. Thank you. Thank you so much. You be okay? Well, my job is to keep you all awake, so if you'll give me a little bit of time, I'm going to do my best to do that. But before we start this evening, I want you to see the power of Asian America. So I'd like to roll this video.
Taking the world by storm, this group is making marketers swoon. Recent reports say they have impact far beyond their numbers, and the numbers are only getting bigger. While just 6% of the US population, if Asian Pacific Americans were a country, they'd be the 18th largest economy in the world.
Asians are the fastest growing immigrant population.
And Asian Americans are growing at a rate of 8 times that of Caucasians.
Asian Americans are not only the country's fastest growing multicultural segment, they have the highest median income of any group.
Marketers who pay attention to the Asian American segment are extremely smart because they're leveraging a group that is A, growing very fast, B, has a disproportionate amount of spending power, and C, has a disproportionate amount of influence.
Only 30% of Asian Americans feel that marketers are currently doing a good job reaching them. What's even more important is that more than a quarter have actually felt offended.
When you look at how much growth is coming from that market and what a sizable percentage that customer already makes up of the population, it's amazing to me to see that there are people that haven't really bought in at all yet.
Asian Americans are champion savers and are the group least likely to be saddled with paying down debt.
During the recessionary state between 2007 and 2009, when everybody else dropped share dramatically, Asian Americans were the only, and I say the only auto consumers to buy more cars during that period.
Overall 5-star safety rating.
Interesting. Asian American consumers typically spend more than the average US household on food, clothing, furniture, pensions, and insurance. With the highest average disposable income, Asian Americans are considered high-value consumers. For Asian Americans, average home value is $347,000 versus an average of $180,000 for the total population.
There's a buzzword in the industry called lifetime value, which represents when a consumer starts buying cars early in their career, and continues on through the rest of their lifetime. You want them to stay with your brand. When I think about lifetime value, I immediately think about the Asian American auto buyer. Why? Because they're the most affluent auto buyer in the United States. But in addition, they're also very youthful.
At AT&T, we know that the Asian American market is critical to our business success. In fact, we have had a focused and targeted marketing program aimed at the segment for over 2 decades. This is a customer base that is highly advanced in terms of tech usage and product trends.
Currently in 2012, 66% of Asian Americans are on social media. From a mobile perspective, Asian Americans, 57% of them are actually accessing the internet using their mobile device. That's a 10-point difference versus the average American.
Smartphone penetration for Asian Americans is now 70%, the highest of any group.
Asian Americans surf 3,600 web pages per month. That's 3.5 times higher than any other segment.
Marketers actually think about this one group. It's not just about their size or their buying power. It's really looking at how new media is impacting their daily lives and how they're leveraging devices to really make purchase decisions.
More likely to make purchases online, they index the highest for past 12-month purchases via the internet. In recent years, Asian language media outlets increased a staggering 1,115%.
At McDonald's, one of our guiding principles is to lead with ethnic insights.
So that's the power of Asian America. Asian America is now 19 million people. It's the 18th largest economic power in the world. So if you were to put every single Asian American and Pacific Islander on an island today, and it became a separate country, it would be larger than Portugal, Austria, Switzerland, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and even Greece. Asian Americans grew by double digits in 49 out of 50 states. North Dakota grew by 300%. It went from 0 Asians to 3. I'm teasing. I want to say thank you to APACC because APACC is reinventing Michigan. In Michigan, you should stand tall. 14 out of 15 counties grew, and Michigan grew in populations for 3 consecutive years. The auto industry is coming back, and you're party to help lead that way. I want to say thank you to APACC and all the board members, particularly Ron, Grace, Rona, Yvonne, who was an amazing singer. I had no idea she had lungs. Aaron, and so many other people that have made this evening possible. I want to give them a warm round of applause to say thank you to all of them. But I want you to be proud, Michigan. I came all the way from California because I'm in awe of all the things that are happening here, and APACC, you're making it happen. So one thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about today, and Vaughn was very explicit to me. She says she's going to go like this to me, and she said, Bill, do you know the 3 G's? And I said, what are the 3 G's? And she said, get up, get to the point, and then get off. So I'm going to do my best to try to keep you entertained and tell you little jokes and a few things like that. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the importance of immigrants. And if you look at a place like Michigan, Michigan's Asian population, like the rest of the country, is the fastest growing population, not only of the country, but of this state. So we cannot take Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders for granted in this state because you are making changes. You have more than 25,000 businesses with gross receipts that exceed $8 billion per annum. Not many communities can claim that, so I want you to be proud of that. I also want to tell you that immigrants can teach us a lot of different things, and I didn't think that I would learn that much from immigrants until I was teaching a class in San Francisco. I went to this class thinking I was going to be teaching a group of American students. I walked into this class, and this class was filled with students from around the world and students that had immigrated to the United States of America. And during our conversation, several of the students said, Mr. Imada, we are confused by American idioms. And I said, well, some of your idioms are a little strange too. But let's hear what you have to say about American idioms. This Indian student immediately raised his hand and said, Mr. Imada, why do Americans say you should think outside of the box? I read something that was very confusing to a lot of South Asians, and it is very confusing to me. And I said, well, when you're in a group like APACC or the Detroit Chamber or from school, wherever you are, you try to find inspiration outside of the confines of your office or your organization. So we step outside of the box for that inspiration. And this gentleman said, Mr. Imada, where did that box come from? Did they buy it at Walmart? Do they use it for a planter? And where did that box come from anyway? And then he said something even more profound. Mr. Imada, why do Americans believe that the answers to all of their issues and problems and challenges are outside of the confines of a place like Michigan, or outside of the confines of an organization like APEX, or the chambers, or the different businesses that are here? Why can't Americans think in the box first, then step outside? Brilliant. And then I had a Japanese student raise his hand and say, Mr. Imada, I have a similar confusion with an idiom. And I said, what is it? And he goes, why do Americans say you shouldn't reinvent the wheel? Now, how many of you have heard that? Let's not reinvent the wheel. And I said, well, once you have a process in place, you got a product or a service and it works, we don't want to spend a lot of time and energy trying to improve it. And he said, Mr. Imada, I came to the United States of America for one important reason. America is a land of innovation. If Americans could make a better wheel, why wouldn't they? So my challenge to all of you tonight is, if you are a business, if you're an entrepreneur or a corporation or a government leader, if you can make a better wheel, do it. And then my very, very favorite one was this Taiwanese and German student. This Taiwanese and German student were sitting in the corner writing all the American idioms that confounded them. And they said, Mr. Imada, we have a whole list of American idioms that we do not understand. Why do black people have a special shopping day called Black Friday? Is there a brown Friday, a yellow Friday, a red Friday? Do white people have special days too? And I said, well, we could talk about that later. And then the Taiwanese and German students said to me, Mr. Imada, why do Americans say you should walk the walk and talk the talk? So I was trying to explain this. Well, when people like me are up here preaching to all of you to do things, you expect me to do the same thing. And the Taiwanese student said, Mr. Imada, why do Americans have to walk and talk? Why can't they walk and just shut up? Why do they have to describe everything in gross detail? Where the fish is from, how the fish is cooked, where they can marinate it. Why don't they just show us the fish like you do in a regular Chinese restaurant? Why can't they feel the essence of a room? Feel the essence of a business? Feel the feelings that people feel when they immigrate to this country for the first time and don't feel welcome. Why don't they feel that pain? And why don't they feel that happiness? Why does it always have to be explained to them? So I am now on a mission. You are not allowed to say from this night forward, think outside of the box, think in it first. Let's not reinvent the wheel, because if you can reinvent the wheel, do it. And now I say, don't say walk the walk and talk the talk. And then later on, this Vietnamese woman came up to me and said, Mr. Imada, I want to start a restaurant. You are a marketing guru. I respect you immensely. And I said, well, what do you want to call this restaurant? Taste of Saigon Street. And I said, that's gross. The last time I walked in Saigon, it was smelly, dirty, disgusting. You didn't know what smells you were smelling. And she said, but Mr. Imada, I grew up on the streets of Saigon, and that is the essence of who I am. And if you don't understand the essence of who I am, you will never understand me as a Vietnamese American. And I said, you're right. So now I tell people, don't say walk the walk and talk the talk, but say taste the street. I also want to talk to you about 5 key things that influenced my life, and I want to talk to the business people in the room, especially the entrepreneurs that are struggling, because there's a lot of hope in a place like Michigan, and I want to provide you with some of that hope. And that the first quote is from Sam Walton, and Sam Walton said, the founder of Walmart, swim upstream, go against conventional wisdom. And like these young students, he did that. He went against conventional wisdom and turned it on its head, and he founded an empire, Walmart stores. And then I've learned from African Americans. African Americans have taught us a lot of different things. And Booker T. Washington once said, if you want to lift yourself up, lift someone else. If you want to lift yourself up, lift someone else. And that includes your competitors. Because if you lift them up, it's going to come around back to you tenfold. And you're going to have a bigger and more robust business. Maya Angelou once said, nothing works unless you do. Now I want you to know a little quick story about working. Maya Angelou said, nothing works unless you do. Access to capital, very difficult for a lot of small businesses. But guess what? When I started my business, I didn't have capital. I borrowed from my mom, my aunts, my uncles, my girlfriend, you name it, I borrowed from them. And then I realized that there were a lot of different resources out there. I went through the magazine and I saw a group called Urban League. I went, what is Urban League? And I found out it was an African-American organization primarily that supports economic development in communities of color. And I actually went to that event, and I was the very first person to arrive. So if you were the last person to arrive at this reception, you lost some points. You should be the very first person at every reception and every dinner, and you should be the very last person to leave. Well, I got there first. I befriended the receptionist, and I said, who's coming to the Urban League event? And she said, Bill, Toyota, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, State Farm. And the list went on and on and on and on. I said, I really want to meet the Bank of America president. And she said, well, I'm sorry that table's full, but I know where he's sitting. But while I was there, I met all of the banks, I met all the auto dealers, I met a bunch of people, and I had conversations with them. And while I was having a conversation with the Wells Fargo Bank people, I said, do you know the Bank of America people? And they said, Bill, they're right there. Would you like me to introduce you? And I just met these Wells Fargo people just a minute ago. They took me over to the Bank of America, folks, and introduced me as if they'd known me for years. And during the course of the reception, I overheard the Bank of America people say, oh my God, 3 people are not going to be able to make dinner tonight from our bank. And we are being honored tonight, and our president is going to be there. What are we going to do? And the receptionist said, I think that young Asian man needs a seat. And they came over to me and said, would you join our table? And I said, absolutely. And I sat next to Liam McGee, the president of Bank of America. And Mr. McGee said to me at dinner, Mr. Imada, what are we doing right? And I told him. He said, well, what are we doing wrong? And I said, I only have a $5,000 line of credit, and I need $25,000. Mr. McGee said, give that man $25,000. And Bank of America at that point became a client as well. So, a couple more things, and I'm going to wrap it up because I know we've got a lot of things going on. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that there was a woman named Catherine Barchetti. She started a retail empire when women, believe it or not, were not welcome in retail. And she once said, make a customer, not a sale. Make a customer, not a sale. And I represent 3 of the automakers in the room today, and I want to give you a little bit of advice. Don't just go to these automakers and do your pitch. Use some of your personality to come through and listen carefully. And I want to tell you, one of the executives at the auto company, I overheard her at dinner saying that her daughter had a devastating peanut allergy. And I made a mental note of that. And a little while later, when I landed Whole Foods as a client, I overheard a conversation from my client saying that her son almost died from a peanut allergy, and she was now making recipes for her son. I made a mental note of that, and I called up my client at Whole Foods and I said, will you do me a favor and call up this automotive executive whose daughter has a peanut allergy and tell her what you're doing? And she said, absolutely, give me your number. I gave her the number, she called, and she told this executive all the things that she knew about peanut allergies. This executive from this auto industry, who's the highest ranking Asian American in all of automotive, came up to an event and said, Mr. Imada, I don't care what I have to do, you are going to work for my company. And they are now a client. So it's very important for us to have those soft skills, to not just sell yourselves, but to make a customer. And that might mean helping them in something other than what you do in business. And I just want to end this evening by giving you one last quote. We're talking a little bit about DIE, diversity, inclusion, and excellence. And by the way, Grace, I have to talk to you about this. I'm sitting at table 13, and I'm in a casino. And the theme of this event is called Diversity, Inclusion, and Excellence, DIE. And it is the 14th anniversary, and if you're Chinese, you'll understand what I mean. 1 is very close to the word for certain. 4 is very close to the word for death. 1 before a 4 means certain death. And then I got my fortune, and it said, don't be a statistic. So don't despair, Michigan. I'm here standing with you, and my job today is to make sure that all of you are successful wherever you are. And I will be happy to not only be your friend, but also your mentor. And I want you to also know one thing when we talk about inspiration for the future. Peter Drucker once said, if you want to predict the future, create it. Apex, you're creating it tonight. Thank you so much.